Hi everyone and very welcome to yet another podcast here with us at Captain Speaking. My name is Petter Hörnfeldt and together with me is...
Welcome everybody. My name is Ben Watts and well, this week it's been a bit of a tough week for aviation. There's been a number of incidents, unfortunately, which we will be talking about, as well as talking about pilots flying without licenses, which has got a lot of attention recently. But so we'll get into that. But Petter, how are you?
I'm good. I'm knackered, but I'm good. I know I said that on my last episode as well, but it's just crazy at the moment. And the thing
busy
is,
boy.
Yeah, busy, very busy. We're trying now to bank content for the entire summer. But the thing is, what I think is the hardest is that I'm Swedish, and as Swede, when you pass the 6th of June, it's summer. And then it is summer. You're supposed to be off until the 1st of August. That doesn't mean that all Swedes are off that. It just means that we want to be off then. We have something called industrial vacation, which is like all of the industries in Sweden in July basically just shut down and everyone is off. Oh. And of course, as a Swede, you have the right of, I think it is 4 weeks of summer vacation. Like everyone has legal right to have that no matter what industry you work in, unless you have a special deal that you've come up with the unions that you have to. I imagine our pilot colleagues probably have that, and also maybe people working in hospitals and things like that. But generally speaking, everyone has summer vacation. So it's just like, once I pass this and it starts to be, the weather is good, now it's like 30 degrees down here in Andorra, I just want to put on my shorts and not take them off until 1st of August and not do anything else. So even though I love what I'm doing, right now I just I just want to sit in my sun chair and listen to good music and play around with the dog, and that's it.
That sounds like a plan, to be fair. I think we can probably all kind of get along with that idea.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like it's like being a kid, It's like grown-ups are not allowed to feel like this, but I do. So it's just the way it is.
We're not grown-ups. I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, busy as usual. So a lot of training, a lot of sim training. But the airline that I fly for, they are been recruiting heavily. There's a lot of expansion going on, which is great. So there's a lot of cadets coming through. And the type rating process, as you know, is a very long one. They start with ground school and then they go into fixed base sims, full flight sims, and then they go and do their check base training. And a lot of them now are coming through that pipeline and they're getting onto the line. So I'm finding myself flying more and doing more line training. So we're getting these cadets now that have passed. It's nice to see some that I've had maybe early on, like fixed base 2 or 3. And now it's like a month or so down the line, I'm flying with them on the line and doing their line trainings, which is pretty cool. Yeah. So yeah, lots of line training, some command upgrade training as well. So there's quite a few captains being promoted. So I find myself one day sitting in the right seat, another day sitting in the left seat. So it's a real mix, which I love. I love the variety. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah, that switch between left seat and right seat, it's interesting. I think people probably think it's a bigger deal than what it is.
Yeah.
But once you're getting used to it, and like you say, when you do it every other day or you do a couple of command upgrades a week or something, that switch between using your left hand and your right hand, which is essentially what you do, it comes quite naturally, doesn't it?
It really does. And I thought, because I'm very right-handed, so I always thought that flying with my left hand would be really hard, but it doesn't. Your brain doesn't seem to work that way at all. And the hardest thing between switching left and right is working out the seat, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you want to adjust your seat, it's like, hang on a minute. No, it's the other side on this one.
One thing I find is that when you're in the right seat, when you land, you try to get the center line between your legs. When you're in the left seat, it's on your right knee, more or less. So it's slightly different in the way that you kind of have to.
It's hard to, I've tried to work it out. And also I noticed that I know when I move from the right seat to the left seat, the instrument seems slightly off from where I felt they would be if I was in the right seat, if that makes sense. And it shouldn't be, because the flight deck is symmetrical. And I don't know if it's an optical illusion or just because it feels different. But I think the hardest thing from transitioning seats when you haven't done it is where to look, because everything is back to front, isn't it? It's
and then you have the 737 MAX. where
Yeah.
you move things around.
You do move things around. You
That,
do.
just for those who are listening, just to understand what we're talking about. So on the 737 NG, the older 737 that we both used to fly a lot on, obviously everything is very little is on the screens. The screens have information from our instruments and stuff, but when it comes to setting your auto brake setting, for example, when it comes to
Flaps.
flaps indications, when it comes to where the engine instrumentation is, yes, the engine instrumentations were on screens, but the screens were fixed. So there were two screens in the middle, and the engine instrumentation was in the same place all the time. But now on the 737 MAX, I guess it's dependent on which airline you fly, but you kind of move it depending on who is pilot flying.
Yeah.
So you can move it from left to right.
Yeah.
And I found that the little MAX I've flown, I found that like it just takes that extra second to kind of, where is it?
Yeah.
Over there.
It is weird. So what we kind of found is that initially it was all going to be fixed, but the feedback when the MAX was being introduced, the feedback we got was to kind of fill you in. The pilot flying would have you've only got 4 displays in the MAX rather than 6 smaller ones on the NG. And you would typically have you've got 2 on either side. Now, the person who's pilot flying would have on their primary flight display the same instrumentation you have on the NG. But then you got kind of like a nav display and an engine instrument display all kind of built into one. And what you can do is move your engine instruments from one of the inboard on the right to the inboard on the left. So you're moving it from left to right. And we found that actually if you're pilot flying and it's on the other display, it's a long way to look because you actually reference your thrust on the approach. You're actually setting thrust that to kind of big picture, really. You're just setting a sensible thrust. And if you've got to kind of look over there to see it, it's not very intuitive. So we found that whoever is pilot flying has the engine instruments on their side. But on a 4-sector day, we alternate on every sector. So on one sector, it's on my side, and the other sector, it's on the other side. But also things like the flap indication, they're all digital now. They're also on the display that moves. So you're going, landing flaps, 30-30 green light. And, oh, hang on, it's over there. But I think it's a bit like moving from right seat to left seat. I find now it doesn't bother me now. I don't even have to think about it. I know at first it was a bit of a, hang on, where is it? But now we're flying them so much now that it doesn't seem to be an issue.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, guys, if you think that what we're talking about now is interesting, we have a virtual 737 course where we both show you exactly how to fly the 737 NG, the way that we've done it. It's loads and loads of information about what we do, when we do it, and why. But we also have a 737 MAX conversion course on there. So
which is cool.
Which is cool. So if you have your home simulator and you want to level up your game, then this course will show you exactly how professional pilots do fly these things, and also how you get over to the MAX when you want to try that.
Yeah, you get to see all the differences. And what I found it's done, we've trained well over 1,000 pilots doing this now, haven't we? And it's what the feedback has been incredible in that it's just transformed the way that they fly. They would look at maybe an approach and it had like an NDB, non-precision approach, and they just go, oh, I won't do that. Whereas now they're smashing it, straight in. They know exactly how to set it up, how to fly it. If it goes wrong, how to do a properly flown go around, how to do turnarounds. It's all in there.
Yeah.
And it transforms the experience.
Good. And if you guys are interested in this and you want to check it out, which address do they use?
Virtual 737course.com. And if you use code CAPTAIN, we can give you 20% off the price, either the standalone or the MAX conversion with it.
Yeah. So go and check it out, virtual737course.com. Thank you. So today we have quite a few things to talk about, and very few of them are nice.
No.
There's been, like, this is one of those weeks where I feel like I'm only creating short content on incidents that are ongoing, because that's something that I've started doing on Mentor Pilot now. When something has just happened, it's breaking news. I've made it a point to create content with what we know and what we don't know, and try to get it out as quickly as possible before all the misinformation gets out there. So if you're seeing me pop up in more and more shorts, then that's why. It's really just to make sure that we get this in front of people's eyes as quickly as possible. Of course, I mean, it started off pretty lighthearted last week with the Pope not being able to to take off with
Yeah.
Iberia flight from I think he was in Madrid going back to Italy. I'm not 100% sure. No, actually, he was in the Canary Islands actually.
Oh, was he?
Yeah,
Oh,
and he was going to fly back, and then. If I'm not misunderstood, like you can't quote me on this because I did not go very deeply into this. I just thought it was funny, but I thought there's a principle here that I want to discuss. But I think it was an Airbus, and when Iberia sets up for a Pope flight or any flag carrier, because it tends to be the flag carriers that carries the Pope, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Like they have special catering, they have special menu cards, they fill up the back of the aircraft with journalists, and then you have the Pope and his entourage flying in the front. And this Pope is cool. I don't know if you saw it, but he was sitting on the jump seat on the way over.
Yeah.
So you'd see the captain and the first officer sitting there, and the Pope in the middle.
Yeah.
I mean, that if you're going down the safety route like that,
It's like the ultimate line check, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, that's the way to do it. And he was being escorted by fighter jets, and like it's a big deal. So the fact that when they had boarded everyone on this flight and were ready to go, then they had some type of issue. Again, I don't know exactly what it was, but from what I've learned, they had some issues with starting up one of the engines, which can happen, right? For a variety of different reasons. There was very strong winds, and there's some indication that maybe there was wind from behind, so you might have the engine running the wrong way, and then you can have issues with starting the engines. But anyway, they couldn't start it up properly, so the captain just canceled the flight. They went tech. The Pope could not fly. And it was a big deal. Like, obviously with media there, they thought, whoa, what's going to happen now? What actually happened was that they found a private jet for him, and he flew away by himself. So he got himself back to the Vatican. But the reason I'm bringing that up is because I really liked the way that they just highlighted in Iberia. Just highlight, well, our aircraft went tech. We are not going to be pushing it then. We are going to be going through the procedures that our technical department requires. The engine needs to be checked. It's going to take a lot of time. So, like any other flight, if it goes tech, and we will take care of it in the safest possible way. Yeah.
It's a PR disaster from one side, isn't it? But it really does highlight why aviation is as safe as it is.
Yep.
There's always that pressure. I think you can feel that pressure potentially, but you're surrounded in this framework of safety that enables you to make those difficult calls.
I know. And I actually think it's super interesting that it is a PR disaster, because from what we know, it should be a PR plus.
It should be.
It should really be something that highlights, like, look how safe this airline is. Look how they bring safety. Now, people are going to say, well, if they couldn't start their engines, they didn't have much choice. But it's the key is that they could have tried to fix it and then tried to get it away. But no, they canceled the flight for safety, and that's it.
Yeah, because there's problems that you can go with, and there's problems you can't go with. There's problems you could go with them from a physically you could get airborne, but you don't go because it's not safe. It could have been one of those, and not going is the right decision. So yeah, hats off to them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So then we had the really tragic crash of a B-52 bomber, which happened on the 15th of June. Crashed straight after departure on Edwards Air Force Base, killing 8 people on board, 6 crew members from the US Air Force, and 2 Boeing employees on board. An enormous fireball, basically. And we just do not know really what happened there, which means that we will not speculate. What we do know was that this B-52 is one of only 80 remaining. So, they're getting fewer and fewer, but the US Air Force are really valuing them. It's a unique weapon system that they really, even though it was made back in the 1950s, that's incredible.
It's insane, isn't it?
It's insane. But the payload that it has, the possibilities that it has to deliver weapons loads and stuff around the world it just cannot be replaced by anything that exists.
Have you ever been to Duxford in the UK? Have you been to the American hangar there?
Yes.
They've got one in there, and you get an idea of the scale, don't you? It literally takes up the entire hangar.
Yeah.
And you've got aircraft hanging around it and so on. But yeah, Duxford, if you haven't been, Duxford's cool.
Duxford is extremely cool. I promised actually my son to go there. I still haven't done it. I have to do that. He will absolutely love it. But anyway, staying on the topic here. So this aircraft was part of a group that was going for upgrades. So they're trying to upgrade the B-52 now, and we've done a Mentor Now video about it that got a lot of attention. They're trying to put new engines onto it, 8 new engines, and there's a whole bunch of reasons why they're not reducing the number of engines, mainly aerodynamic reasons and things like that. You just can't. It was built for 8 engines, you have to have 8 engines. But they found a new engine that they're going to replace it with, which is going to make it more efficient. But this aircraft had its original engines on it, that much we know, and it was upgrading a part of its radar system, from what we've understood. There's been rumors about this test program being delayed, and that there was a lot of pressure of getting it on the way and getting things going. But again, we won't really know anything until there's a final report. And the sad thing here is that because this was a military aircraft as part of a quite sensitive testing program, it is highly likely that we will never get a final report. We will never really know what happened here. So the thoughts for my team and from me obviously goes to the crew members, families and friends. A truly horrific situation.
No, it's not been. It was a good bad start to the week, and then it continued, didn't it, with the next one? What do you know about that, Peter? Have you got any news?
Which the NetJets accident?
Yeah, the NetJet one.
Yeah, no. Again, that we know that it was a private jet from NetJets that I think it was on approach when something happened, most likely having to do with the engines, and that it kind of, instead of continuing in towards the runway, it lined up with a motorway and landed instead. But I'm still waiting for all of the information there. I kind of hold back at least 24 hours to see more information coming out before I do something, and I haven't gotten the script yet for that short, which is coming out. But one thing that can be said from that is just how hard it is to use motorways for airliners and bigger private jets. I think people have a preconceived idea that, asphalt is asphalt, it's a straight line, but there's so many obstacles around. It's not built for an aircraft to land on. So
no,
we did a video, an accident video about an accident that happened quite a while back, where there was an airline. I think it was was it a DC-9? I can't remember now. It was too long ago. But anyway, an airliner coming in and doing exactly this, lining up with a motorway, thinking that was going to be the best, and they ended up crashing into a fuel station. And it was very bad, very bad.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I mean, for light aircraft, when you're flying in your Cessnas, you're always, anything single engine, you're always looking for somewhere to go if the engine fails. That's pretty much what you're spending your time doing. You're flying along, there's a good field, and a motorway potentially could be usable there. The only thing you've got there are the light poles, the lamps, because they clip a wing and it's game over. But for an airliner, it's central reservations, cars, and you've also got to think of the risk of the cars. You're bringing in now potentially tens of, if not dozens, of motorists. That, and you're now involving in this. So it's a very, very difficult decision. Do you go for this very tempting, what looks tempting from the air, straight bit of tarmac, but there are obstacles, or do you end up putting it into a field somewhere else and avoid involving civilians on the ground?
It's hard, and especially if it happens on short final. We know that if you have engine failure, especially dual engine failure. If you have single engine failure, we train for that. There's procedures for how to do a single engine go around, even from a 2-engine approach. So this is something we train. But if you, for whatever reason, get a dual engine failure, ice accumulation in the fuel system, whatever it might be, well, then you don't have many seconds to decide what to do. You might be in a high drag situation and a low speed situation. You now have no thrust. You're not going to reach the runway, because this approach that we're doing, the 3 degrees approaches that we're following, it's based on us using quite a lot of thrust. Like, you're sitting with about 60% thrust set almost the whole way down. So if you lose that, you're not going to reach the runway, which means that you now have to choose somewhere to go.
You've got a radius, and that radius cannot be extended.
No.
You can shorten it, but you can't go beyond it. And it's a big part of the training we do with regards to, we train dual engine failures, and it's a big part of it. And one of the things you've really got to make the point is you can never stretch the glide, really.
No.
And it just gets dangerous. And we can talk more about that. But
yeah, but just for you out there who's not familiar with the language, stretching the glide would be to get your nose up and kind of use your speed to try to get further. Right, so it's very tempting to, if you're coming in with, let's say you have an approach speed of 140 knots and you're supposed to land with 135, something like that. It's very tempting to try to use that speed in order to get to the runway. So if I just put the nose up a little bit, well, then I will reach it. The problem is that the aircraft stalls at some point.
Yeah.
And once you go below a certain speed and the aircraft stalls, you have no control over what it does. You can drop a wing, you can drop the other wing, it can just fall down. So it's much better to actually fly it in with the speed that you're supposed to have and be able to maneuver it and then land short, but being able to be in control of it, than to try to stretch it out and then potentially completely crashing.
But the problem is, and you see this all the time, is the human factor side of it, because you'll give them like a double engine failure on approach. You see your where you basically, when you're sitting in an aircraft and you're looking at a runway, if the runway is going up in your windscreen, effectively, you're getting low. You're getting lower and lower as the runway is kind of going up in your window. You can visually project where you're going to land because you can see the relative movement. And when you see that you're not going to land on the runway in a high stress environment, you've got an double engine failure in an airliner, the natural tendency is to pull back to try and get it back how you want it. But as Petter said, when you do that, your airspeed rapidly reduces, and then you've got to do something to stop it stalling. And the only thing you can do is lower the nose. And when you lower the nose, you come down even steeper. So it's forcing yourself to maintain that speed, because it is far better to have a controlled landing at the right speed onto a field or whatever than it is to try and stretch that and not make it and crash effectively. But the closest I ever came to that actually was was years ago. I was doing some owl building out in the States. I was in a 172 in Kissimmee in Florida. And this was a long time ago. And the maintenance, we all went out there. We're all kind of Brits going out there because America was cheap to fly. And we go out there and hire an aircraft and do a couple 100 hours of flying, which is amazing. Yeah. But you kind of had a little bit of a doubt about the maintenance. You kind of look at it. And I remember one guy taxiing off from the hangar where it had work done overnight, and there's like this pool of oil and about a handful of nuts and bolts just sprue underneath. And I was like, oh my God. Anyway, it was fine. I remember coming into land, and in Kissimmee, I can't remember which runway it was. You come over a very busy road. I can't remember what it's called now, but you come over a very busy road, and then you come over the threshold. And I was coming over the road. I was a little bit higher than I wanted to be. I wanted to make a certain exit, and I closed the throttle and just pitched down a little bit. And then the engine just died. It just stopped, and this propeller just kind of stopped in front of me. I'm like, oh God, here we go. But thankfully, it was that.
At least you're high.
Well, at least I was high. Exactly. So I was high, and I managed to just lower the nose, keep the airspeed. I think it's like 55 or 60 knots. I think it is in the Cessna, and actually land just on the display threshold and kind of come to a stop on the runway. But if that had happened a mile earlier, that would have been a different kettle of fish. And it's that horrible kind of sinking feeling you get in your stomach, when you realize this engine, you're adding thrust and nothing's happening.
In single engine prop flight, it's very because you really have that
looking at you right in the eyeballs,
just reminding you. Yeah, just reminding you that I'm
just adding drag now, and you're trying to moving. You try and restart. I remember just moving the mixture out and back, and it turned out in the long run that it was the idle setting had been set completely wrong in the carburetor. So it basically just starved it of fuel. Apparently, that's what it was. It wasn't like carburetor icing or anything like that. But so a bit of a random. That's the closest. I just remember that feeling of that horrible sensation in your stomach. Yeah.
Now, from what we know so far, I think there's just been one fatality in this, and I think it was a passenger actually. So, but we're learning more and more about what happened on this particular flight. But as always, it's going to take a year or so before we get any final report. It's going to take a month for a preliminary, and then a year or two for the final report. So, super tragic, of course. But the thing that we wanted to talk about, that we feel like we can talk about a little bit, is the story that came out of Canada. And this one, this one is interesting, and I don't know how many emails and messages I've gotten about this. So, authorities in Canada have charged a pilot who allegedly flew as a captain for 17 years without a proper license. Now, the emphasis on proper
Yeah.
there. We'll get to that in a second. Right, so this is a man from Barrie in Ontario. He started his airline career back in 1998, and before that, he's been working in the military. He's been flying helicopters. He came into Air Canada. He's only been working for Air Canada as a first officer, and then in 2009, he was promoted to captain, which is important for this story. But again, we will get back to that. There's scant information about exactly how much he flew with this false license or with improper licensing, but they're saying that there's over 900 domestic and international flights on the Boeing 767, Boeing 777, and Boeing 787. But he also has passed all of the checks, the line checks, the recurrent training, so that's twice a year in the simulator. So this one is a little bit interesting. On the surface, this looks horrible. Like, it sounds like, okay, so what? This pilot flew without a license for 17 years, and that's not the case.
No, I got loads of messages through my socials, and how does this happen? Tell me, as an examiner, how does a pilot go through 17 years and without a license?
And actually, that's really where things becomes a bit sticky here, because it turns out that this pilot did have a commercial pilot license and did have the type ratings to fly these aircraft. The problem, though, is that when you move from being a first officer to a captain, you have to have something called an Air Transport Pilot License, an ATPL. This is essentially like a captain's certificate. Right? You need 1,500 hours of total time. You need a number of night flights and number of IFR flights, and you need to have done specific theoretical examinations of it in order to lift the ATPL. So what happens nowadays is that almost everyone who goes through their commercial pilot license training, they do the ATPL theory. When they do their exams, there are 13 exams that they need to do. They do that at an ATPL level already then. Because what that means is that you get something called a frozen ATPL. So that means that you have done your theoretical part, it's examined, it's done, you don't have to worry about that anymore. You still need to get the hours, which will take you normally 2 years at least, around 3 years in most cases. And then you need to do a skill test to lift your ATPL. Once you've done that, you just get an ATPL instead of a CPL. That doesn't mean that you're a captain. It just means that you now can become a captain. Then it's up to the airline to see if they think that you are suitable for it. You need, in some cases, it's seniority based. In some cases, there's a lot of different things that goes into. But once they want you to become a captain, they will then train you. You'll get specific simulator training. There will be further examinations, and there will be line training, and this whole part, which this pilot did go through. Right? He must have gone through that because he was upgraded from a first officer to a captain within Air Canada. So he's done all of this training, but he did not have the ATPL. So that step was missed. Now, like you said, you got the questions about how can an examiner miss this? This is where it gets sticky because you wouldn't, right? It's a mandatory step every time that you do an extension of a license, that you check the license, you make sure it's the correct type, you make sure that it's written on the correct paper, and that all of the dates are correct. This is part of your job as an examiner to do. So this must mean that he had something that looked like an ATPL, and I think this is the problem. Now, again, we don't have the details exactly what happened here. But they're kind of indicating that there was fraud involved, and the fraud would then be that somehow this person had a fraudulent ATPL that he was doing his recurrent checking on, and that's why he wasn't found out until some eagle-eyed person probably saw something that was slightly out of whack, sent in a query somewhere, and the Canadian authorities started Project Icarus, which is what they called it.
Yeah.
Very, and found out that it actually was wrong. But what do you feel?
Yeah, I
Spontaneously
think
when you hear this?
there's a lot of how did certain things happen, because there's so many things that are in place to prevent this. And I don't know with Canada whether they're electronic licenses or paper still. It sounds like it's paper, but I mean to try and kind of process how that could be faked, because the paper that your license is on is a bit like a banknote. It's like money. It's got, it's got certain patterns on it. It's got like silver edging on it. And it feels a certain way. So it's a bit like money in the sense that when if I got your license out, Petter, and looked at it, or you took mine out, you'd know, you looking at them all the time, you know that is a genuine bit of paper and the font is correct and the size is correct. So it's not just a blank bit of paper, but I know in certain parts of the world, it's electronic and you can just print it off and just show somebody a printout of your license. But what I think it's moving towards now is more of an electronic copy where you have a QR code or a little card with a QR code, so that all you got to do is scan it. And everything now is protected in-house by the Aviation Authority, so that it can't be forged by individuals. Whatever you've got is electronically stored securely by the Aviation Authority. But yeah, I think it's a typical case of the media really blowing this up, because I can tell by the concern, the genuine concern from people that have written into me going, how can this happen? If I've flown with a pilot that hasn't got a license, or will I fly with a pilot that hasn't got a license? I'm worried. And it's a genuine question. But the thing is here is that, as Petter said, this pilot was an experienced pilot. It sounds as though he'd done everything he needed to do. He'd done the upgrade process in the sim. He'd been checked to the right standard. The only thing he didn't have, because the only thing that he wouldn't have had was to get his ATPL, was his skills test, I would imagine, because the theory he would have done most likely. And then the skills test is something that Petra and I do regularly. When you've got an experienced FO that's going to come up for command, is they will do a normal check that you do every 6 months, with the addition of what we call a raw data ILS. So this is a precision approach that you fly without the help of these flight directors, which guide you down the approach. You've got to do it old school, scanning your instruments. And it's just something they have to demonstrate competence in. And once they've done that, that's it. So whether this guy just didn't like raw data, I don't know.
No, it's something weird has happened at some point. I mean, my guess, if I had, and once again, very highlighting that I'm guessing here, is that he didn't have the ATPL theory done. Because it's 17 years ago, and he came from the military. Okay. Maybe he had the CPL theory and the CPL done. Then it's a much bigger deal, because then you have to go through and do all of those 13 exams again at a higher level, which is like a year of study.
Yeah, that's a big ask, isn't it? It's got to be one or the other, isn't it? Or possibly both. Yeah.
Possibly both. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to take one,
exactly. But I think big picture, from a safety perspective, was safety compromised? Probably not.
No, I don't think so. This would have been like, because they had a track record of him flying within the same airline from when he was a new first officer all the way up until he became a captain, and he was then successful as a captain in all of the checking environment and everything from his colleagues to everything. I would have said that this is more of a paper pushing thing than anything else. But then on top of that, obviously you have the dishonesty part of it, which is not great. And there's no question that this was wrong, like that he should not have been in that position until he had the correct licensing, because that's the thing. It's interesting because this is not the first time that this has happened, right? About a couple of decades ago, this Swedish pilot, Thomas Salme, was caught after having flown a whole career with 3 different airlines without having even a commercial pilot license. He only had a private pilot license, which is, I have to really emphasize here that the difference in certification between a private pilot license and a commercial pilot license is huge. Like the private pilot license is built for you to be able to fly recreationally with smaller aircraft in most of the cases. And just like, you have to be trained up so that you are safe in that role. But to go into the commercial side, you really have to do a lot more theory at a much deeper level. And there's much more involved in it, and much more training and much more certification and much more hours, everything, right? So this guy, the Swedish guy, he did not do that. But what he did do was he had a friend working in SAS Flight Academy that gave him access to a 737 simulator, which is fine. You know, like back then, when they weren't used, they could take their friends and family in. And I think sometimes people do that. There's nothing wrong with that. But he did it, and he did a lot of working on flight simulator at home. Like he had his own flight simulator, and he practiced at home, and then he went out there. He got in at night, and he flew this 737. So he knew how to fly it. But of course, without any of the theoretical background, without any of the, you and I sitting in there and explaining to him that, if you go low on your fuel levels, you're going to get a hydraulic issue because this and this and this and that. So he self-taught himself to fly the 737, online manuals, chat forums, things like that. And then he forged his type rating and his license, got somewhere down in Italy to some small airline there, managed to convince them that he actually was a pilot. They hired him. He started flying. And then eventually, now this, I have to check out the exact details here, but eventually he kind of got into the normal system. Like the Italian authorities issued him with a proper license at some point. And then he was in the system, and back then there was no cross checks electronically, obviously, because this was before that. So he just kept flying, and he moved from one airline to the other, and then he flew in the third airline without ever having any of the training needed. Now that is a different kettle of fish.
You can get people to fly the sim. You can take someone in the sim, and you could get them pretty decent. But it's when things go wrong, isn't it? As you and I both know. That's when the old saying, pilots don't get paid for what they do; they get paid for what they can do.
Yeah, because I had when I did a short that included information about the Swedish pilot, because it's known, he's written a book about it himself, so he's very open about it, and very unapologetic as well, should be saying. Like, it's not like I think he would do it all over again if he had the chance, right? And people were kind of, I think he got a little bit of a cult following because of that. People thought that it was cool. It's something that a lot of people, I think in their darkest minds, like, I could probably do that as well. That would be awesome. But the thing here is that, like you're pointing out, you don't really know what you're made of until it's getting tested. And this is also when the only thing that you can fall back on is your training, right? He was absolutely right that he also passed all of his sim checks in all of these airlines, and there were some good airlines that he worked for. But the thing with simulator checks is that you kind of know what you're getting. You can prepare for a sim check, right? A simulator check, per definition, has to include a certain number of items that you can definitely prepare for, and you should. An emergency does not. An emergency, like, look at what happened to Qantas 32, for example, where you had an uncontained engine failure, where a turbine blade goes in and cuts off your electronic feed lines and your hydraulics and and everything happens at once. The only thing you have then is your experience, which he at some point gathered, and your training, and your theoretical knowledge, your technical knowledge. Now, if you've skipped that bit and you're flying on that day together with maybe a new or a weak first officer for some reason, all of a sudden you've taken away all of these safeguards that the passengers that are flying with you are taking for granted.
Yeah.
So that is inexcusable.
And the good news, just to put anyone's minds at rest now, the world has moved on along since then, and training now and checking now is the evolution is happening, so that rather than having set procedures that you do and you can revise for, and exactly, I'm going to have this emergency, I'm going to have this problem, and you learn and you think about it, and then you go and do it, and you do it really well because you've thought about it. What's changing now is we're moving into this evidence-based training, which has been around for quite a while now, but everywhere seems to be adopting it more and more. And it's all about using our human, our competencies as pilots and applying that to scenarios that we haven't seen. And you're trained to competence. So if let's say your workload management was seen to be slightly subpar, there's training that you can do that will bring that competence up, enable you to offload tasks, to delegate, whatever it might be, to prioritize, so that then you're trained to competence. And there's a not an infinite, but a huge variety of scenarios that the instructors and the examiners can now give pilots So if I gave a scenario to Petter, it would be completely different to the one that I give to Joe Blogs tomorrow, for example. So there's no way of preparing for it. The only way you can prepare for it is to build your own competencies up, to build that resilience. And that would eliminate this completely.
It to a certain extent, it would eliminate. I mean, I still think that you can get around, as in like operating pretty well within a certain, because there's still going to be a certain type of scenario that you're going to get. You can prepare still, but not for everything, not in the same way as you could before. But what I'm talking about is when stuff that is just not in the book.
No, and these are the interesting things that you can give. Like you might, like you just mentioned, Petter, a really good scenario might be something where you've got an engine problem that gives you a fuel leak, and the fuel leak can't be stopped. So you need that system knowledge to go, okay, what's going to happen when that tank runs out of fuel? How's that going to affect other systems? And if you haven't got the training or the kind of that ability to understand what's going on and then prioritize those tasks, it gets very messy.
But then there is another thing here as well, which is worth touching on, and that is if you're in the system, if you're in the airline, right, and you come across a weakness in competency, of course, our goal is then to train the pilot up to get that competency and get better at it. So unless you go super deep, if you're like, how come you have no idea about, for example, loss of comm procedures? And then you're like, oh, it's because you've never looked at the book that shows you how to do it. You're never going to go that deep. It's going to be like, okay, you didn't know about loss comm. Okay, I guess you've forgotten it. Here's how you review it. Now let's check it. So you can definitely see how someone who doesn't have that fundamental knowledge and haven't got that initial training, once you're in the system, they're going to be super hard to be weeded out, unless there is someone like whoever picked this Canadian guy up and who eventually did pick up the Swedish guy, that like, no, this paper, there's something off here, because they do get caught. It's just that it takes a lot of time before they get caught. Right. And then, I mean, I want to kind of spin on that subject a little bit, because something that has been happening, that's been documented as well, has been people cheating on their ATPL exams, their CPL exams, their theoretical exams, basically, using all kinds of different things, from earpieces to cameras to everything. Of course, that's idiotic. I mean, it's not like your math exam in school here. Now you're learning something that might save your own life one day. So maybe you should know it. Maybe you should know what a cumulonimbus cloud is and why it's a bad idea to fly into it. And so that's one thing. But one thing that is a bit more nuanced is the way that people are now studying for their exams.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
To understand this, the way that you are examined generally is that you will get multi-choice questions. There are some subjects where you'd have to come up with actual answers, like navigation, for example. You have to know formulas and things like that. But generally, you'll have a question that has A, B, C, D, multi-choice. Now, what happens then is that obviously these questions that are being asked on these exams, they get leaked, and then people compile question banks. And you can go in and the idea is that you can test your knowledge on those question banks and in practice exams before you go in to do the actual examination, which is a great idea. The way that it came up and the way that it started was great, because you took your book up, you read through the book. These are big, like 400 pages book, 13 of them, a lot of information. And then once you've read it, then you could do a little bit of test to see if you've understood it. And if you then didn't understand it, you couldn't answer the question, you got back into the book and you read that again. That was the idea. But what do you think happens?
I know exactly what happens. Yeah, people just study the question banks and they learn the answers. And that's all they do. So when they see the question in the real exam, they go, oh, I know that's C. And I tick C and I move on.
Yeah. So yes, that happens. And then, of course, the authorities are not idiots. So they know that this has happened. So they refresh the questions that they ask. and that again then gets leaked. So there's always a little bit of a delay in this, right? But you can get up to a fairly high pass rate. You need 75% to pass one of these. You can get up to a fairly high, okay percentile rate just to study the question banks. You are still going to need to answer the other questions that are new as well. But here comes the next thing that really, really makes me angry, and that is because the authorities have now figured out that people are doing this, they bastardize the questions. So they ask more and more horrible questions. Instead of asking questions that actually examine the knowledge level of the student, they now like, how can we make this even more evil? So the questions, sometimes the questions that are being asked are so out of this world that it now makes sense to just
That's the
study
point.
the
It just
question banks.
reinforces. It becomes a them and an us. It's a battle, isn't it? Yeah. And
And it's like the authorities are going to, we're going to
Yeah.
make sure that we can trip them on something. And then the students like, well, this has nothing to do with what I read in the book. I have
Yeah.
to do this. So it's completely understandable, because I know everyone that's listening to this, like,
Yeah.
dude, who is this guy? Like,
Yeah,
of
yeah.
course you're going to study the questions bank. And I studied the question banks myself. But back when I did it, you always needed to remember that there is the exam. You make sure that you pass the exam by studying question banks. But if you can't answer some questions, you study the books, because that is what you are going to be. That is what you're going to be living after this. Like, you're going to be in an aircraft, and you need to understand why a swept wing is different than a straight wing.
Yeah, you've got to, I think for me, I mean, I think it very much depends on the personality of the pilot. For me, I live and breathe aviation, particularly when I was a teenager and in my early 20s. I was just hungry for knowledge, like I know a lot of people are. So when I started learning my ATPLs, I was getting all of these light bulb moments. That's why that works. And so I loved it. And I didn't have the luxury of question banks, because I was at that point where we were going from the UK CAA exams, which had loads of question banks. And I was the first cohort to go into the JAA, the JAA, the pre-EASA.
Yes,
You were the same, weren't you? There was no question. No one knew
yeah.
anything what the questions were. They being completely rewritten. And I remember the ground school instructors on day one going, guys, I'm so sorry, but we're just going to have to teach you absolutely everything that's in these books, because we have no idea what's going to be in the exams. So we had to study everything. And I'm glad that, I mean, yeah, I worked my ass off, but I'm glad that I did, because A, you have that, it forces you to do that kind of level of knowledge, and B, you kind of get a better sense of, maybe more satisfaction at the end of it, to know that you've actually done it all as it was supposed to be done. But of course, I get why people study the question banks. Of course.
Of course. No. It's that battle between the authorities and the students that really annoys me, because it reinforces the wrong type of studying. And I think this is one of those. This is definitely one of those careers where you actually do need to know what you're doing. It doesn't mean that you need to know everything that's in the book and has ever been written, because I learned a lot about like Laurent's sea navigation and what happens to the variation if you're flying a DC-3 over the North Pole. I'm not going to use that. Right? So you have to use your common sense a little bit as well. But this whole thing, there's just variations of what misunderstandings about what you actually are studying for, and what techniques you need to use. In order to
and you can see it sometimes. Sometimes, I know if you look at like the global pilot group, one of the elements they're graded on in a sim will be application of knowledge. So they might have to do a written exam before a sim, for example, a tech exam, and they might get 100%. And you go, this pilot's amazing. They know all of the systems. Then they get in the sim, and there's some failures that interact with other systems, and they have no idea. And that really highlights the difference between someone that's just studied the question bank, got 100%, knows all the answers, but cannot apply it to the real world, can't use it now to help them manage these multiple failures that they now need to go and manage. So it's the old story of, if you don't put the groundwork in, if you don't build up on a solid foundation, things are going to fall down when you need it most. So
yeah, and this is not a place that you want things to fall down.
It's always tempting to take the easier route, isn't it? And it's just human nature, and we've all probably done it. But these are the things you don't want to skimp on.
No, not in the beginning. Like, where you only set your foundation once. So,
Yeah.
so absolutely. But anyway, so that's kind of all of the incidents that I wanted to talk about. If you have questions about this, guys, send it in. As always, we'd love to hear from you. But talking about questions, why don't we answer a
Yeah,
few?
we've got a few. We've got some really good ones. The video that we put out the other day on puppies on Mental Now. I did a video
Yeah.
on that, and it was quite an interesting one because it needed a lot of work to try and present it in a way that it would make sense. You know, to try and understand what these puppies are and how they interact with different aircraft. And I got a lot of messages from pilots actually on this going, that video was cool. I genuinely didn't know that about that puppies. Yeah.
Great. Great. Because this is exactly, I mean, remember we had the discussion and when we talked about this and we talked about it here on the podcast, and we discussed it afterwards and like, we need to make a video on this because I don't think people out there know this. And we have a unique channel to reach a lot of people in a lot of different airlines in a lot of different places over the world. So I'm super happy
It's
that we got
brilliant,
that
and
response.
it's something that I train. You know, when you and I, when we're training pilots, it's the puppies. People tend to just trust the puppy lights, and if you haven't seen the video, it's definitely worth a watch. But they're telling us visually whether we're high on the approach, low on the approach, or on the correct approach. But they're set up for different aircraft sizes, and you can't. It's one size. It's no one size fits all. So if you've got the puppies that are set up for a 747, they're not going to work brilliantly for a 737. But in order to make the approach work, you need to know that. And for example, in Stansted, the puppies in Stansted have a minimum eye height over the threshold of 66 feet, or just over 60 feet. Whereas in the 737, we should be crossing at around 48 feet. So if you follow the puppies in Stansted, for example, they're set up for like a bigger aircraft. You will land long potentially. You'll land too far and you're too high effectively on that last stage of the approach. And if you ever do a Cat 3, we train a lot of auto lands where the aircraft will fly the electronic glide slope down to the runway. And we do it in good weather to train pilots for when they actually do need it. And you'll see that we're bang on the glide, but the puppies, you'll be going 2 reds, 2 whites into suddenly 3 reds. And just as before you touch down, it's 4 reds. And that's because it's designed for an aircraft where the cockpit is a lot higher than you. And they're like, oh yeah, it's a very effective way of demonstrating this to cadets. When you're talking about it in the crew, they're like, yeah, I think I get it. And then when they see it, they're like, now I understand. And hopefully that's what this video has done.
Yeah, well, and that just to give you a little bit more info about this, we talked about it because of that
The 7.6 in Newark.
Was it the 767?
Yeah,
that they crashed into a light pole and a truck on the turnpike there in Newark. And in that case, the PAPI was set up for a smaller aircraft because it was a shorter runway. So now they were coming in with a big aircraft on a PAPI that was set for a smaller. And of course, if you set the cockpit of a bigger aircraft exactly in the same point as the Cessna would be, then of course your landing gear, which is a lot behind you and below you, is going to be much lower than the landing gear of a Cessna. We don't know if that was the cause. There was other things involved here. They were going low on purpose, for example, as it seems like. But this is something that people just do not understand, that you just take away your margins, basically. So that was super interesting. And hopefully we got that.
Yeah, it seemed to. It was
across.
nice to see. It's probably the one that I've got the most messages from out of all the videos I've done.
Yeah, no, I want to just address one thing that I've also seen questions about that I just need people to understand, because a lot of people said, well, don't you just change the angle depending? And you need to understand that these poppies are set at 3 degrees. And if you think about something that is physically set to 3 degrees, if you tilt that up, it's now not set to 3 degrees anymore. It's now much more steep, right? So that means a much steeper approach, and vice versa if you put it down. So the only way to change it is to move it physically along the runway. Like you can have it at 3 degrees and then you can move it 10 meters further away. Then all of a sudden, now it's set for a bigger aircraft. This is why you can't really change the angle of the poppies when you're dealing with this. So
yeah, it's a really good point. Because it's a question people get. They say, well, like movable lenses and so on, but it just doesn't work that way. It just won't work. Yeah, but it's great. It's great to see so many questions coming on that one, or feedback anyway. Any other questions that you've got, Petter? I've got a couple here.
Okay, so I have one here. Hello, Peter and Ben. My name is Brandon, and I've been a fan of the channels for several years. I've noticed that quite a few of the accidents and mishaps that have been covered involve a check ride or some extra pilot in the cockpit for one reason or another. Is there any correlation to this? I would be curious to know what percentage of flights total have an extra pilot in the cockpit versus the percentage of accident flights that involve an extra pilot in the cockpit. As always, thank you for all of the information. So it's an interesting observation. Just generally, there are quite a few flights that are being flown with extra pilots in the cockpit for different reasons, either for training, sometimes because there's just an extra pilot following with and they're flying on the jump seat, sometimes for checking. So it happens. And it happens quite regularly. But I would say as a percentage, any guess?
I have no
10%?
idea. I don't think there'll be a correlation between having a third. I think having an extra pilot, a bit like the Qantas flight. Do you remember there was a check ride on there and they actually positively contributed to the outcome? So,
yeah. No. So I think that, I don't think that there's any correlation either, because if you look at the amount of accidents out there and you look how many have had check pilots in this, it's very, very,
and it will probably correlate quite nicely to how many flights as a percentage are training or check flights.
Yeah, exactly. So no, I don't think there's any correlation. We do it quite.
It's a good observation.
Quite often. Yeah. And it's also an interesting thing to talk a little bit about, because it's there is a little bit of like, it's no question that it's more relaxed if you're just doing a normal flight than if you're being checked. And I think most pilots out there will recognize that all shit happens on check rides. Like, but that is actually just a psychological phenomenon, because when you're being checked, you notice much more when things are going wrong. So when you're doing a normal flight from A to B and you have a bird strike, for example, it's just like, okay, that was a bird strike. I need to fill in the form, yada, 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 yada. But when you have a bird strike and you're being checked, it feels like a much bigger thing that you really have to now talk about properly and stuff. So I remember that it's especially true when you do your command upgrade check. Almost every pilot you ask, like, how was your command upgrade check? They're going to say, it was horrible. There had stuff happening to me that I've never seen before. There was delays. There was this and that. But then you realize actually that, no, that's just a normal flight. It just felt like that because it was your command upgrade check, right?
It's true. Yeah, it's weird. It's, I do a command upgrade and I'll speak to even I think you can take that out even further, because if you speak to a command upgrade student who's just passed their check and go, you see him a month later and go, how's life on the left seat? Oh yeah, it's great, but I've had this, I've had all these little problems. And it feels like it's all the first month of your command upgrade is chaos. But of course it's not. It's just, like you say, it's the way you are perceiving it.
Yeah, and especially then when you're doing your command upgrade, it's because when you've been in the right seat, you've always just looked over to your left, and the captain has been the one that's had to take all of the decisions. You've been part of it. You've explained things, you come with your view on it, but ultimately it's not up to you. So, but when you then move over to the left seat, all of a sudden everyone's looking at you. So all of those tiny little things that like, it looks like we're going to be a little bit heavy on landing, all of those things now is like, okay, so how am I going to solve this? How am I going to motivate it? Do I need to write a report about this? So that burden of the 4 stripes really, really comes on during not only the command upgrade process, but the first few months after.
It's interesting how people perceive it as well, isn't it? Whenever you speak to, I've been doing command upgrade this week actually, and I was chatting to the guy beforehand that sort of say, how are you finding it so far? And he was like, it's great, but it's really weird. As soon as I sit in the left seat, it's almost like my capacity just minimizes. And what in the right seat, I'll be thinking of this, and this. And now I'm in the left seat, I'm like, I can't do it. And it's that pressure of it's just on you now.
Yeah, and that's that. The good news is that that's just going to take a few months, and all of a sudden you're going to be way back again. But just going to be even more, because it's like whenever you take on a bigger role, you're going to feel the same. Like, I feel like an idiot now. Why do I feel like this? But it is the extra energy that your brain needs to focus on doing new stuff, and then it's the extra stuff that you need to keep track of. So you'll just notice after a year or two, when you're starting to get into the left seat, that's like all of a sudden you have an even better situational awareness, like this helicopter view of the entire aircraft.
Yeah,
ideally. Cool. Now, unfortunately, we're running out of time. I have to once again run away very quickly. I think we always finish our podcast like this. Benny, it's
As
been
always.
a pleasure. If you're out there, you know you can watch this on YouTube, listen to it on Spotify or wherever you find your podcast. We love hearing from you, so send in your questions wherever you're listening to it, really, and have an absolutely fantastic
Have a great week,
week.
everybody. We will see you in the next one.
Bye-bye.